You're listening to the Change Your POV podcast network. This is Attack Friday, episode 201.
And so my why, which I now refer to as purpose, because what I found with vets is when I say why, they go straight to what I would call a motivation. So financial stability for my family. I like to take care of people. And there's something deeper and darker, right? There's something really deep that drives that need. So we actually work with them around that purpose.
Marine spouse and daughter of 2 Army veterans, patriotism and service are never more than an arm's reach away. To further demonstrate that, how does former FBI special agent sound? Well, I never did understand what the special and special agent was for, but damn if it didn't sound cool. Guns and badges, black suits and cool titles, we all know that there's a lot more to being an FBI agent, special or otherwise. How about focusing on Russian organized crime? That doesn't sound dangerous at all. Once she hung up the Russian version of searching for Bugsy Siegel and Al Capone, she transitioned out of government service and joined the McChrystal Group, founded of course by General Stan McChrystal, who led the Joint Special Operations Command in Iraq during the Persian Gulf Wars and was top commander of the American forces in Afghanistan. Completing Special Forces training in '79, McChrystal became the commander of Detachment A, Alpha Company, 7th Special Forces Group, Airborne, where he earned the nicknames such as Stan the Man and the Pope for his work ethic and highly disciplined lifestyle. Our guest today worked for the McChrystal Group as a consultant and recruiter, and later founded Hire Served, a recruitment company that goes out and finds military veterans, spouses, and former law enforcement officers and recruits them for companies that want to hire served. Let's hear from this week's guest, Jean South.
Last summer, started realizing that I had to get off the road. Being in consulting, as many people know, is road warrior time, and it was starting to really kill my family and my relationships. So I found myself once again trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up, and recognized that when I transitioned out of the bureau, I'd struggled with that, and now I was struggling with it again. Who you've been across every role you've ever had, and it's not special agent, it's not consultant. That was a title you bore, but you were something consistent across the board. Tap into that and you'll find your future. And so I started working on tapping into that and working with a lot of coaches that are good friends and doing a lot of soul searching. And one of my mentors said, it was the Simon Sinek concept, right? Start with why, then go to how, then go to what. And so I said, okay, what's my why?
The golden circle.
Right, the golden circle. So my purpose is really around the fact that I believe there's strong value in hardship. And I believe there's a place where hardship starts to hurt us. And I think that if we can reach in and help people in that place before hardship becomes too hard, where, they've learned some lessons, but now they're starting to need help. That's kind of a magical moment for people, and it's pivotal, and it really changes their life. And so that's really around my why, is I really believe in helping people when it starts to become too hard. Then my how tends to be one of two ways. I either just swoop in and parachute in and save the day, or I make powerful connections for people. So I started exploring ways I could fulfill that purpose in the ways that I know how. And that created a bunch of exploration in the headhunting space, in the, job seeker space. Somebody said, you need a specialty. Who do you know a lot of? And I'm like, well, I can't get rid of the veterans in my life. I can't even go to the grocery store without talking to one. My whole world is full of people who served, which,
Sure.
I love, right? Obviously all of our friends, et cetera. That's my tribe. And so I said, okay, this is my tribe. And what I learned is our tribe has the same challenge leaving service that I had lived leaving the FBI. It's that lost, confused, how do I fit back into society? How does society value me? How do I help my service convert into the civilian world? It's all of those things. And I knew that it was important for us to have the purpose conversation when we were matching people to organizations that they were going to work for. Because otherwise you're creating you're just recreating that struggle over and over again if we don't match on purpose. And I didn't see other organizations really doing that. I didn't see that happening anywhere else.
So I'm a little embarrassed to admit that I never really considered the difficulty other non-military service members would have in their transition. Law enforcement, firefighters, first responders, and yes, FBI special agents. I guess the military truly doesn't have the monopoly on transitional difficulties, or fitting in, or finding purpose, reacclimating to the real world. Ever since I found out that you were an FBI agent, I just pictured you as Clarice.
You never know.
Yes, right? So
it's apparently a thing.
So throw that out there. I'm probably, like I said, probably not the first time you heard it, but all right, Clarice. So I want to really dive in a little bit into this matching concept between veteran and organization. And really this conversation kind of got kicked off as a response to a post that I had written for LifeFlip Media, which was also duplicated and released on American Grit as well. Mm-hmm. And it's this idea that, and you've probably seen this with your experience, and I just want to kind of dig into it a little bit. It's this idea that organizations are veteran friendly. And so a couple of points here I wanted to kind of bring out is the fact that now I got out in 2005, so it was pre-TAPS, it was pre any of that. But the folks that I talk with that get out since then and most recently, there's this false expectation about job availability to veterans for this. If you are a veteran, like you got a DD214, like you're guaranteed a job, and a lot of people think, right? Yeah. And then they list off all these companies and organizations that are quote unquote veteran friendly. And I really, the reason why this strikes a chord with me is because I worked for a company that was very, very veteran friendly from a PR standpoint, from a social media standpoint, from all of that, right? But then when you peel back that Oz's curtain and you really look into what kind of veteran friendly organization it was really, they were getting tax breaks and credits for hiring veterans, so they were claiming some benefit there. They were obviously able to claim victory on all their PR and campaigns and social media and all this other stuff, which, they're gaining social proof, so they think. However, it backfires because you start placing veterans in organizations for the sake of only being veterans, then what you end up with this mismatch, and it causes animosity between the organization and the veteran, and usually it ends in them parting ways. Either the company fires a veteran or the veteran leaves the organization, and it leaves a black eye on both parties, and it's just not a good fit for either party. So talk to me a little bit about any experiences that you may have seen in your studies or in your experiences with Higher Served.
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head as to why I didn't join the existing big firms that are in our space. And that is not to say that individual recruiters, individual people within those organizations aren't thinking about this. That is to say I didn't see a corporate mandate around it. And it made me really uncomfortable hearing some of the practices that veterans felt very much like they were in a cattle call. And that I find highly unacceptable. Because again, at the root of this, we're talking about my tribe, we're talking about my friends, we're talking about my people, and the people that not only have made all the sacrifices that veterans have made and all of those things, but those are the people who I get, right? And I'd rather, we have an annual party at my house where I tell all my civilian friends, the veterans are going to do whatever the heck they want and say whatever the heck they want. And if you can't handle language and you can't handle a little bit of talk about making things dead, I suggest you not come to my house. So like, that's my tribe. And I'm comfortable with the ability to openly talk about the hard things we've had to do to protect this nation. So I was really uncomfortable with anybody commoditizing my tribe. So that's where I said, okay, we've got to think about what's different, what's important. And in that purpose conversation is what allows you to then evaluate a company and say, do I want to work for this company at its core? Do I agree with its values? Do I agree with what their mission is in life? And do I have the skill set to be there? So, when I joined McChrystal Group, we were literally talking about changing the way the world did business by making it more interconnected and helping them see the world as a network, not a org chart, right? And I believe firmly that is what businesses will have to do to survive. I believe connectedness is what creates that magic and helps us avoid hardship. So for me to join that organization, it just made sense. And so we have to make that logical step for people. And that means that sometimes we don't make a placement. And so we had one veteran who his skill set was perfect, yet he believed that his life on earth was about educating the next generation and really changing the world through taking care of young kids and impacting their early experience, which is really powerful. Except for the company that was hiring was a DoD contractor that was in support of mission critical assignments and very important, but he was going to leave there because they weren't addressing the youth of America. Therefore, he was going to be unhappy. It was a matter of time. And so we couldn't place him there, even though he was a perfect fit skills wise. And that meant we had to walk away from that paycheck. And, that's a super hard thing to tell a team in a new company is we're going to walk away from basically your rent for this month. I'm super sorry. But when I did that, everyone on my team came back to me and said that was absolutely the right thing to do. We support it. Don't worry about it. And so that was awesome.
And you kind of bring up a good point there, right? A lot of veterans now. Here's just the God's honest truth, and that's what we do so well on the show is we tell it the way it is, but we tell you the shit that you're not going to ever hear anybody else say. Let's just be honest, okay? And that's
what we mean and mean what we say.
We do, and it's important, and sometimes it gets people upset, but it doesn't make it any less true, right? So one of the things that's so important that veterans, when they get out of the military, they don't get trained on, okay, maybe somebody sits down and helps them kind of figure out a resume. Okay, whatever. Maybe they do a mock interview, maybe. But what they don't do is they don't tell veterans, and I have many conversations with folks that I mentor on Veterati. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Veterati.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
and that's one of the first things that we talk about is when they go to a job interview and they don't get an offer. They immediately feel defeated, right?
Yeah.
They feel like they failed. They feel like they weren't good enough. They feel like they weren't qualified. They feel like all of these things, right? And I have to explain to them, listen, it has nothing to do with your ability to do that role or that job. It has nothing to do with your lack of skill sets or ability or business acumen. It may, just like you pointed out, it may have everything to do with the fit. And if a company hires you just to hire you and they don't consider the fit, whether it's fit in the department or fit within the organization as a whole or fit in the mission, right? I mean, that guy that you were just telling us a story about, his mission, his purpose wasn't in alignment with what that company was trying to do. That doesn't make that company a bad company. But it just doesn't, because here's the deal. A company wants to hire people that are going to be an asset, not only from a skills perspective, but an asset from a what's the word I'm looking for?
Engagement.
Yes, they're going to champion.
An engaged employee.
Right. Exactly.
Who is in love with their company, in love with their mission. Engaged employees are better to your customers.
Right.
They're better to your their team members, they follow better, they lead better, and they stay longer.
Absolutely.
Everyone wants that. And so I believe the way you get that is by stressing about skills to the extent of, can they do the job? You have to make sure they can do the job.
Mm-hmm.
But are they in love with your mission? Are they aligned with your mission? And it doesn't have to be, this guy who wants to change America by shaping the youth of America, it doesn't mean that the organization's mission has to be, we will shape the youth of America, right? Like, it doesn't have to be verbatim.
Sure, right.
But they have to be kind of hanging out in the same neighborhood at least.
Yeah, like a big brother, like a Boys and Girls Club or a YMCA,
Right.
or, a coach of a football team or something along
At
those
least
lines.
in the same neighborhood.
Right.
Yeah, at least somewhere in this. I mean, again, if we're trying to deploy the guy overseas to do intel for the government, we've missed.
Yeah, right,
Like,
yeah.
that is not in the neighborhood. That is
Absolutely.
absolutely.
And so here's the other piece too that I really want to kind of get your take on, and
Yeah.
and that's the idea of, and I'm trying to formulate some examples around it because it's easier to understand. So veterans get out, especially, and I see this a lot in combat veterans. And what I mean by I don't mean combat vet. I'm talking about combat MOS veterans, right?
Yeah.
Because I was a combat MOS veteran.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
a lot of people, and for those listeners out there that are confused about what that means. So a combat MOS, a military occupational specialty, could be, that you're focused towards combat. So you're a tanker, you're an infantryman, you're a forward observer, you're a reconnaissance, artillery, right? So a lot of people consider those as non-marketable or unmarketable skills when they get out of the military. People
That's why every single one of them wants to be a cop,
right,
or a federal
Or a
agent of some
project
sort.
manager.
Yes.
Or a project manager. Don't get me started on project management.
Right.
Because if I see another project management resume from somebody who clearly just has done a skills translator, not for nothing, I did a skills translator, and 1811, which is the federal law enforcement code for an FBI agent, that also says project manager.
Yeah.
So, guess what? You can plan an operation and execute it well. Yes, you can project manage. Does that mean that that's where my highest and best skills are? No, no.
Right. Yeah, because as you get somebody that's an officer or an NCO that's been a direct line leader for so many years, and all of a sudden they become a project manager. Guess what? Everybody that reports you is all dotted line. There is, right? So you might be able to lead a project, but you're not leading people in a direct manager sense. So a lot of people are like, oh wow, I wasn't expecting that kind of thing. So.
Or you're a project manager in a consulting team where you're expected to execute and project manage against a model. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, what? There's more. So and project manager looks different in every company. It's such a, that is one of the reasons I rail against skills translators, because again, I took an ASVAB when I was 18 or 22.
Skills Translator. It's an online-based program where you hop on there. It's provided by all kinds of companies. You put in your branch of service, your MOS or military occupational specialty, and a few other details. I found one on military.com. My rank, staff sergeant. And then there's the subspecialties. There's an option there for convoy commander. And then training schools, 13 Fox, ALC Phase 2, 13 Fox, SLC Phase 2, BNOC, Warrior Leaders Course, which is the old PLDC. And then there's a section for civilian skills. Of course, automotive preventive maintenance is at the top of the list, cargo handling, logistics support, and my favorite, firearms handling and maintenance. So what were my results? Well, top of the list, and you'll appreciate this one, radio dispatch operator. Now, I guess I kind of qualify for that being a podcast host. But next on the list is training specialist. And here are some of my more favorite ambiguous job titles that I qualify for. Regional business manager, district manager, superintendent, and get this, activity manager. Not entirely sure what that does. What about this one? Review coordinator. And then a couple will pop up on the list that I'm quote unquote eligible to perform due to my military skills and abilities as a 13 Fox Fire Support Specialist in the United States Army in the rank of Staff Sergeant. I've attended a few schools. Yep, Director of Operations. Or how about this one? Director of DevOps, Developmental Operations. Now, I've talked to retired lieutenant colonels and full bird colonels that are having a difficult time filling these particular roles. But yet, here I am, lonely old Staff Sergeant Lazary, going to be a Director of Operations after just a few short years in the United States Army. I don't think so. Or how about this one? Enrichment Leader.
The military said, this is what we need, go do it. Mm-hmm. They trained you to do it because they ascertained that you were trainable for that skill set. And then you did it because you were saving the world. And we all are out here saving the world. And when you leave the military, you don't have to keep doing what the recruiter signed you up for when you were 18, guys. Like, come on, kids.
Yeah, like I carried a gun until literally 5 years ago. Well, no, I guess it's 4 years ago. I carried a gun my entire adult life.
Yeah.
I mean, with a little bit of interspersed stuff here and there, but from 18 until age 39, I carried a gun for a living. Yeah. And that's what I did. That was my identity.
Doesn't mean you should go be a security guard.
No, it doesn't mean I should be security, law enforcement, or whatever. Right? Corrections officer, whatever.
Well, that's what I did. I ended up becoming a corrections officer because I had no idea what else I could do. Right, and that was long before I become educated about what was actually marketable. And that's the challenge. Folks that are getting out of the military, they assume they have no marketable skills because like to your point, Gene, they go on to these skills transfers, they type in their MOSs, schools they've been to, and all of a sudden it spits out the same old garbage, and it's all garbage. And so one of the things, and I'm going to ask what you do, but I have my own method for breaking things down to help people see what they have in terms of skill sets and marketable skills. It's a conversion method that I teach, and everyone that's gone through it is like, oh my God, like mind blowing, right?
Yeah, you guys should talk about it offline.
Yeah, it's one of those. I'm actually in the process right now of putting together a training for it to do an actual online webinar to teach more people, because everybody that I teach it to, they're like, oh my God, I'll never see things the same way again. And now they have that tool in their toolbox to be able to apply later in life, and huge success with it. And people are like, dude, you got to figure out a way to share this with more people. So I'm working on that, and it's all through just what I've learned in my trial and error process and mentoring coaching. But so when you are talking with people newly out of the military that, let's say, are combat MOSs, think they have no marketable skills other than project manager, cop, corrections officer, etc. What do you do to kind of help them discover other things qualities that they have? And now, and please don't say, oh, well, your attention to detail is better than everyone else because you're a veteran, or you show up on time for work every day because you're a veteran, right? These are all the stupid things that I hear all the time. And I'm like, I did 10 years active in the Army. I can tell you not all of my soldiers showed up to work on time every day. As a matter of fact, I was having a good day if all my team showed up on time. So just because you're a veteran, folks, doesn't make you totally reliable or more reliable than your counterpart civilian. But anyway, I digress.
So I'm going to address two things there. One, I'm with you. I think we're like soul cousins on that, because, I get a lot of people who say, well, I want to hire veterans because they're disciplined, they do the job, and they show up to work. And I'm like, well... There's got to be something else interesting about veterans as a whole. One of the things I think, especially our combat MOSs, don't recognize, and this is part of working for General McChrystal and seeing what they talked about, the adaptability of our fighting force has increased a bazillion fold. We used to be fighting a nation state, and that was kind of an action, reaction, right? What's Russia going to do? My dad watched the Russians, right? And what did Russia do? Do we need to do anything? Yes or no? And then what did we do? And then Russia make us a decision. what we are in now, this insurgency, we're not fighting. We aren't at war against Afghanistan. We're at war against the insurgents hanging out in Afghanistan who, oh, by the way, aren't asking permission of their general whether they can shoot at us. They just get an idea one day when they wake up and go out and do things. And so we have to understand that the fighting force has had to become very adaptable, very, very resilient, because decisions are being made on the ground now that used to require approval all the way up a chain. And so they're having to adapt in the moment a lot more frequently and a lot differently. And I would argue that non-vets probably are an equivalent, because a lot of the non-vets saw the same kind of warfare. So when you look at that, one, my big thing is, let's talk about adaptability and resiliency, especially when you're in a combat MOS. Now, beyond that, how do I help them with their skills? I actually have created a system that essentially is, if we don't have a fish, right? We don't have a job that fits your skill set. I'm going to teach you to fish. And I've based it on my years in the FBI with human intelligence recruitment, as well as language learning. So I learned to speak Russian while I was in the FBI. So adult language learning is that, everybody talks about how important immersion is. So I actually help people create conversations where they can start to learn the lingo. So what we talk about is start from your purpose, figure out how to articulate that. Often it's an I believe statement. So I believe hardship is good for people. And at some point when it becomes overwhelming, it damages them. I believe that we can reach in that moment and make powerful connections that change people's lives. I do that by blah, 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 right? So currently I do that by running a company that's a recruiting organization, right? So I teach people to actually articulate their statement of their purpose and who they are and how they do those things. And then ask people as they are, and we use Veterati all the time, hop on Veterati, find a mentor who you think is in a field you're interested in, talk to them and ask them, this is who I am, this is what I do and how I do it. What does that look like in the civilian world? What is that? Because I'm not going to know every kind of job that exists, right? It's impossible for me to be the Encyclopedia Britannica of jobs, but I can tell you how to find out. So you might get on the phone with somebody and say, what is this? And they're like, there's actually a job called X. And now you then say, okay, I'm going to explore that job. And so I had someone when I was in my exploration said to me, insurance adjusters kind of fly in when there's a hurricane and they save the day. You like to parachute in and save the day. I do. Okay. So I called someone who was one of those and talked to her and said, tell me about your job. Tell me about what happens. And what I learned was that was not the right job for me. But I learned that by having a conversation, and I started learning about the recruiting space by having all those conversations. And the magic that happens is eventually you start to understand what's important to people in those organizations. And you start to know how to articulate it. And somebody will say, for example, with me, I've built multiple task forces and taken down some, criminals in the process. What I learned was that is building a cross-functional team that accomplishes the organization's mission. And that's a thing the world likes. And so when I heard someone say once, we really need someone who can build a cross-functional team because blah, 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 right? And I heard them and I was like, I've done that. I know what that is, So in that moment, all of a sudden I'm going, build cross-functional team. That goes on my resume, right? Like I am writing that down because I am good at that. And then the next conversation you have, you say to someone, I've built multiple cross-functional teams across disciplines. In fact, I've worked with geographically dispersed organizations to accomplish the mission. Would that be interesting to your organization? And all of a sudden they're like, holy crap, this girl knows what she's talking about. No, I just learned it like 2 days ago. I just knew how to take what somebody said, write it down, figure out that was me and regurgitate it.
And a lot of people don't realize that the job description, right? So every company out there that has a position that needs filled, it comes typically with some type of a rec or a job description. Right. So many people look at the job description and they just ask themselves, they go down the list and they ask themselves, have I ever done that? Nope. Have I ever done that? Nope. Have I ever done that? Nope. when instead they should be asking them questions. Have I ever done anything like that? Right. Because doing so, and this is the other thing that I teach the folks that I mentor, is a lot of people find job descriptions discouraging because they feel like they have to check the box on every requirement before they apply for the job. And I'm like, no. I was like, think of the job description like the list that your mommy and daddy asked you to make when you were putting together your Christmas list to Santa. Right.
It's the wish list.
Right. So why did mommy and daddy have you write a letter to Santa and put down everything you wanted for Christmas? Is because mommy and daddy knew that there was no way they were going to get you everything on the list, but they want at least a few things, 3 or 4 or 5 things from that list. And if they can get you those 3 or 4 or 5 things, then you're going to be happy little Johnny, right? And a job description is really no different. It's the manager that says, if I were to have the perfect, Superman, Superwoman, ideal candidate, they would have all of these skills. So they put down everything in hopes that they cast a large enough net where the fish that they catch is going to fill the majority. Not all. No hiring manager has the expectation that they will hire somebody that has all of those requirements. And if they do, they shouldn't be a hiring manager. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah, the other piece on that is you also have to understand, so they've written to their ideal, but if they have a job opening, there's someone somewhere with pain in the organization, right?
Yep.
You don't, because they've had to clear it. They've had to get approval for that, that position. Because usually in a lot of organizations, every time a position goes empty, you have to reauthorize it, et cetera. So someone has done work to say, we need this, and until we fill this, we are experiencing pain of some sort. So what is the pain, right? What are they solving for? And so I saw one recently that was a nonprofit board situation. And throughout everything in this rec, I heard they are growing and they're having serious growing pains, and they need someone who can communicate with the board while also communicating with the constituents, while also helping the growth, right? Like someone who can manage growth and people. Everything was about, can you manage growth, people, and image? And they kept saying that same problem over and over again. So at that point, listen, can you manage growth, people, and image? Oh yeah, I've done it this time, and this time. Okay. All the other stuff is superfluous.
Right.
Can you solve they have a growth and image problem. Solve that, and they don't need you to be, super good at X, Y, and Z.
Right. I was approached by a recruiter for the current job that I have now, which, oh, by the way, I'm in my 3rd week of employment right now. So,
nice.
So I'm a new hire. But I was looking, but I wasn't like nose to the grindstone looking. I was open to opportunities. And through my LinkedIn profile, a recruiter reached out to me and says, hey, I'm not implying that you are looking, but with your experience and profile, perhaps with your network, somebody that might be able to fill this requirement that I'm looking for. And I'm like, oh, well, as a matter of fact, I'm open to the right opportunity.
As a matter of fact, I hate the job.
Conveniently,
I really want this job.
And I'm like, what do you have? So he sends me the job posting or the job description, and it conveniently did not have on it the company name.
Of course not.
Yeah, and that was kind of the first question. I'm like, so he's like, I don't really. I hold that close to the chest. I don't really give that away right away. And
can I pause that for a second?
Yes, please.
So people think that's shady when recruiters do that. And I'm going to actually push back and say, one, in a lot of situations, the recruiter only gets paid because they found you. And so just do the person a solid. But the other thing is they have a direct line often to the hiring team. So when people are like, okay, the recruiter wouldn't give me the name, and then they want to go around the recruiter and just hire directly to the company, you actually cripple yourself. So when the recruiter does that and is like, it's because they know that candidate behavior is to sprint to the website and frantically put themselves in the computer system. And that recruiter isn't going to get paid, one, for finding you and getting you interested. And two, it actually cripples like your chances because they can take you straight to the people who are looking.
Right.
So just kind of two job seekers, just let your recruiter know if they're being shady about that and you think it's shady, let them know, listen, I trust you to represent me. I just am curious about the organization because I need to know about the org before I go there.
And I'm really glad you paused there and kind of explained that because you're absolutely right. In this case, the none of the positions that the recruiter had for this company was listed on any job postings anywhere. It wasn't on the website. It wasn't nowhere. The company is growing exponentially. But the reason why, and I'll let everybody in on the punchline, the company that I work for is Coca-Cola. And the recruiter wanted to make sure that he was finding people that were interested in the position and weren't just brand whores, right?
Right.
Because a lot, especially with brands like Coca-Cola or any other customer-facing brand, a lot of people just want to get their quote-unquote foot in the door, right?
Yeah.
And be a part of the brand, but they're really not really excited about the position. And so a recruiter is doing his due diligence because he's trying to find the right candidate for the position, not somebody that just wants to work for the company. They don't really care what job they end up with initially because they're going to try to work their way around. That might happen anyway. And
that's one of the like tricky things. So one of the things you'll see for our postings, right? We don't list names, but I want candidates to be attracted to the organization's mission. So I will talk about the client, right? I'll talk about why they're committed to veterans, why they are who they'd be a good place to work for, things like that. Because the problem is if you don't know that it's Coca-Cola, you don't know if you're aligned to their mission.
Right.
And so you could go down the road and put time in and not love Coca-Cola's mission, and that would be tragic. But also all those reasons, right? So it's this interesting dance, and I'm not going to say we've perfected it, but we're trying to make sure that the candidates can fall in love with the organization without knowing its name until it's time for that to happen in the relationship.
Finding a job can prove to be hard enough all on its own. Transitioning out of the military or other service organizations with grandiose false expectations isn't only difficult, but can be emotionally draining and paralyzing. Landing a job through your efforts of springboarding off of your service often leads to employment that leaves you unfulfilled, disappointed, and disgruntled. Check in with reality once in a while and discover what makes you an ideal candidate. Is it because your attention to detail is better than most? Or are you punctual and show up to work on time? Perhaps you have, quote, strong leadership skills. But then again, what does it even really mean anyway? Are you ready to face the facts that not all companies are really all that veteran friendly? Or that you're not all that better than your civilian counterpart? Welcome to the real world. It isn't that easy, but you can make things easier for yourself. Get involved with amazing platforms like Veterati. Become a mentor or a mentee. Check out Hire Served, Gene's company that gets it and gets you. Join us on Facebook at Change Your POV Squad Facebook group and leave us a rating and review on iTunes. And don't forget to subscribe to the Change Your POV podcast network on your podcast player of choice. Until next time.